Janius, holy hand of war of the Kroll, stood atop the grand spire of mist, his amphibious form silhouetted against the setting of twin moons. Below him stretched the vast, sacred swamps of Croea, their primordial beauty a testament to the wisdom of the ancients. Mist curled around his feet as he breathed deeply, gills fluttering beneath his jaw. The rich scent of decaying vegetation and mineral-laden water filled his senses, a perfume sweeter than any other in the galaxy. This was home. This was what the star gods had blessed them with, and what they were destined to spread across the cosmos. Holy One, a voice called from behind. Janius turned, his powerful tail swishing gently. A young acolyte bowed low, forehead touching the mossy stone of the spire. The high druids request your presence in the Chamber of Whispers. Janius nodded, his large, dark eyes reflecting the starlight. I shall attend them shortly. Rise, young one, and tell me, have you completed your daily communion with the sacred waters? The acolyte stood, a flush darkening his mottled skin. Yes, holy hand. I have listened to the whispers of the swamp and felt the pulse of life within its depths. Good, Janius said, placing a webbed hand on the young Kroll's shoulder. Remember, it is through our connection to the swamps that we understand our place in the great cycle. It is why we must spread our ways to the barren worlds that cry out for our touch. As they descended the spiraling ramp of the spire, Janius explained the intricacies of Kroll governance to the attentive acolyte. The druid-like theocracy that ruled their society was as old as the swamps themselves, a delicate balance of spiritual guidance and practical leadership. We are led by the high druids, Janius intoned, who interpret the will of the star gods through the whispers of the sacred waters. But it is I, the holy hand of war, who must act upon their visions. In times of peace, I oversee our expansion and the transformation of new worlds. In times of conflict, I lead our people in defense of our divine mission. They reached the entrance to the Chamber of Whispers, a massive hall carved from a single, enormous cypress tree. The acolyte bowed once more and retreated, leaving Janius to enter alone. Inside, the high druids waited, their aged forms draped in robes woven from the finest swamp mosses. The chamber was thick with humid air and the soft sounds of dripping water. Bioluminescent fungi cast an eerie, pulsating light across the gathered assembly. Holy Hand, the eldest of the druids, spoke, her voice as rough as tree bark. We have received troubling visions. The sacred waters show us encroachment upon our divine territory. The dry ones, the humans, they multiply and spread like a blight upon the stars. Janius felt a ripple of concern pass through his powerful frame. He had encountered humans before, during the great terraforming crusades. They were a curious species, seemingly intent on spreading their own form of civilization across the galaxy. But never before had they dared to approach the sacred space of the Kroll. What would you have me do? Venerated ones, Janius asked, already anticipating the answer. The high druids exchanged glances, their bulbous eyes blinking in unison. You must prepare our people, Holy Hand. The time may soon come when we must defend our way of life, our sacred mission. The humans must be shown the error of their ways, or made to withdraw from our ordained path of expansion. Janius bowed deeply, accepting the weight of his responsibility. As he straightened, his powerful muscles tensed with determination. By the will of the star gods and the whispers of the sacred swamps, I shall not fail. If the humans will not respect our divine right to spread the blessing of the swamps, then they shall feel the full might of the Kroll. As he left the Chamber of Whispers, Janius's mind was already turning to strategies and preparations. Janius stood at the helm of the Kroll's flagship, the swamp's embrace, his webbed hands resting on the living control panel. Through the vast viewing membrane, he watched as the barren world below slowly transformed. What was once a desolate, rocky landscape was now a patchwork of spreading wetlands and burgeoning swamps. Another world blessed by our touch, he murmured, satisfaction evident in his deep, resonant croak. The terraforming crusade had been going on for generations, but Janius never tired of witnessing the sacred transformation. A junior officer approached, bowing low. Holy Hand, the seeding of the northern continent is complete. The sacred spores have taken root, and the first primordial pools are forming. Janius nodded approvingly. Excellent. Soon this world will teem with life, a testament to the wisdom of the star gods and the power of our people. As he turned to study the holographic display of their progress, a flashing alert caught his attention. "Report," he commanded. The ship's seer, a Kroll gifted with enhanced psychic abilities, closed her eyes and communed with the ship's living systems. "Holy Hand, we detect anomalous activity at the edge of this system. It appears to be human vessels." Janius felt a ripple of unease pass through his body. The humans had been encroaching more frequently on Kroll expansion zones, but never had they come so close to an active terraforming site. "Show me," he ordered. The viewing membrane shifted, zooming in on a cluster of sleek, metallic ships. They were unmistakably human in design, all harsh angles and lifeless materials. "They dare to violate our sacred space." Janius's voice was low, dangerous. "Hail them. Let us see what madness drives them to such transgression." Moments later, the face of a human appeared on the communication panel. Janius always found their dry, fur-covered heads disconcerting. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Federation," the human spoke. "We're on a routine patrol and mapping mission. We mean no harm." Janius drew himself up to his full height, his powerful tail swishing in agitation. "Human, you trespass in Kroll space. This system and all within it belong to us by divine right. You will withdraw immediately." The human's expression changed, a mix of confusion and defiance. "I'm afraid there must be some misunderstanding. This system isn't claimed by any recognized galactic power. We have every right to be here." "Recognize," Janius spat the word. "We need no recognition but that of the star gods. This world and countless others are ours to transform, to bless with the sacred waters of life. Your presence here is sacrilege." As the argument escalated, Janius felt the weight of his responsibility as Holy Hand of War. The humans clearly did not understand or respect the Kroll's divine mission. Perhaps it was time they were taught a harsh lesson. "You have been warned," human Janius said, his voice cold. "Leave now or face the consequences of your trespass." Without waiting for a response, he cut the communication. Turning to his officers, Janius's eyes blazed with righteous fury. "Prepare our warriors. If these dry-skinned interlopers will not respect our crusade, we shall show them the error of their ways." As the Kroll ship surged forward, weapons primed, Janius felt a grim satisfaction. This confrontation had been long coming. The humans and their allies needed to understand that the galaxy belonged to the Kroll, and all would eventually be blessed by the sacred swamps. Little did Janius know that this skirmish would be the spark that ignited a conflict beyond anything the Kroll had ever faced. The terraforming crusade was about to evolve into something far more devastating, a war that would test the very foundations of Kroll society and belief. As the first shots were fired, Janius whispered a prayer to the star gods. "Guide our hands, bless our cause. Let the waters of our homeworld flow across the stars, unstoppable and eternal." The battle had begun, and with it, the destiny of two species was forever altered. The sacred pools of divination bubbled and churned, their usually placid surfaces now roiling with ominous visions. Janius, the Holy Hand of War, stood motionless as he observed the high druids interpreting the signs. The chamber was thick with tension and the heavy scent of aromatic swamp herbs. "The waters speak of great upheaval," croaked the eldest of the high druids, her wizened fingers tracing patterns in the turbulent liquid. "The dry ones multiply like a plague, Holy Hand. Their metal ships infest the stars that are rightfully ours." Janius felt a cold dread settling in his stomach. The initial skirmishes with the human vessels had escalated far beyond what he had anticipated. Reports flooded in daily of human activity encroaching ever closer to the heart of Kroll space. "Show me," he commanded, his voice resonating with authority. The high druid gestured, and the pool's surface shifted, forming a three-dimensional star map. Pinpricks of light represented Kroll-controlled systems, while a creeping red tide showed the extent of human expansion. "By the star gods," Janius whispered, his large eyes widening in shock. The human presence had grown exponentially since their last divination. Their colonies and outposts now formed a stranglehold around several key Kroll terraforming sites. "This cannot stand," he declared, turning to face the assembly of druids and military advisors. We offered them the chance to withdraw, to respect our divine mission. They have chosen to defile our sacred space instead. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of angry croaks and hisses. Janius raised a webbed hand, silencing the crowd. Venerated ones, he addressed the high druids. What do the waters tell us of our path forward? The eldest druid closed her eyes, swaying slightly as she communed with the sacred pools. When she spoke, her voice seemed to come from the depths of time itself. The star gods demand a cleansing, holy hand. The humans and their allies must be purged from our ordained territories. Their presence is a blight upon our holy crusade. Janius nodded solemnly. He had expected this, had perhaps even hoped for it. The humans had proven themselves unworthy of coexistence. Then it shall be done, he declared. I shall oversee the ritual cleansing myself. We will strike at their shipping lanes, their colonies, their allies. Let them feel the wrath of the Kroll and know that they have angered powers beyond their comprehension. As the assembly croaked their approval, Janius's tactical mind was already formulating strategies. The humans were technologically advanced, but the Kroll had numbers, fervor, and the blessing of the star gods on their side. Prepare our fleets, he commanded his officers. We strike at the next alignment of the moons. Let every warrior know that they fight not just for territory, but for the very future of our species and our divine mission. As the chamber emptied, Janius remained, gazing into the pools of divination. The surfaces had calmed, but he could sense the turmoil that lay beneath a reflection of the storm that was about to break across the galaxy. Star gods, he prayed, dipping his hand into the sacred water, guide our path. Let the humans and their allies know the error of their ways. May our righteous fury cleanse the stars and pave the way for the great swamplands of destiny. Little did Janius know that his actions, driven by religious zeal and a misunderstanding of human nature, were about to plunge both species into a conflict that would reshape the galaxy. The ritual cleansing he envisioned would soon become a crucible of fire and blood, testing the limits of both Kroll and human resolve. As he left the chamber, Janius's heart was filled with grim determination. The war to reclaim their sacred space was about to begin, and he, the holy hand of war, would lead the charge into the stars. The twin moons of Krollea aligned, casting an eerie glow over the vast swamplands. Janius, the holy hand of war, stood aboard the command deck of the swamp's embrace, his powerful form tense with anticipation. Around him, a vast armada of Kroll ships hung in space, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescence. The time has come, Janius intoned, his voice carrying to every ship in the fleet through a psychic link. Let the great purification begin, for the glory of the star gods and the sacred swamps. A resounding chorus of croaks and whistles echoed through the network as the Kroll fleet surged forward, entering faster than light travel with a flash of green light. Their first target, a major human shipping lane that cut too close to Kroll space. Janius had studied the patrol patterns meticulously, choosing the moment when the lane would be at its most vulnerable. As they dropped out of FTL, chaos erupted. Human freighters and their escort ships were caught completely off guard. Janius watched with grim satisfaction as his fleet tore into the unprepared vessels. Show no mercy, he commanded. Let them feel the wrath of the star gods. Organic missiles and beams of concentrated swamp gases lanced out from the Kroll ships, ripping through human hulls. Janius felt a twinge of regret at the loss of life, but quickly suppressed it. This was necessary. This was holy. Holy Hand, one of his officers reported, the human ships are attempting to send distress signals. Jam their communications, Janius ordered. No word of this must reach their homeworlds. Yet. The battle was short but brutal. Within hours, the shipping lane was reduced to floating debris and drifting bodies. Janius ordered his fleet to move on quickly. This was only the beginning. Their next targets were the nearby human colonies, small outposts on the fringes of Kroll space that had, in the eyes of Janius and the High Druids, no right to exist. The first colony fell quickly, its meager defenses no match for the Kroll war machine. As Janius watched the bombardment from orbit, He felt a surge of righteous vigor. Each human structure that crumbled was replaced in his mind's eye with spreading swampland. See how easily their artificial worlds fall, he proclaimed to his troops. The star gods favor our cause. But as they approached the second colony, they met stiffer resistance. The humans had managed to scramble fighters and orbital defenses. Janius felt a grudging respect for their tenacity, even as he ordered their annihilation. Holy Hand, his tactical officer, reported, "We're detecting approaching signatures. It appears to be an allied fleet, non-human." Janius's eyes narrowed. The humans had called for help from their alien friends. This complicated matters, but it did not change the fundamental mission. Engage them all, he commanded. Any who stand with the humans stand against the will of the star gods. They too must be cleansed. The space around the colony erupted into a furious battle. Kroll ships clashed with a mixed fleet of human and alien vessels. Janius found himself tested as never before, coordinating attacks and defenses across multiple fronts. As the battle raged on, reports came in of counterattacks on Kroll positions elsewhere. The humans and their allies were quick to retaliate, but Janius had anticipated this. He had positioned the bulk of the Kroll fleet to defend their core worlds and terraforming operations. "Let them come," he told his worried officers. "They will break upon our defenses like waves upon the shore. And when they are spent, we will surge forth once again, unstoppable as the tide." As the conflict expanded, encompassing more systems and drawing in more species, Janius began to realize the true scope of what he had initiated. This was no mere border skirmish or punitive action. This was war on a galactic scale. But there was no turning back now. The purification had begun, and it would not end until either the Kroll or their enemies were utterly defeated. As the swamp's embrace jumped to yet another battlefield, Janius offered a silent prayer to the star gods. "Guide us through this crucible," he thought. "Let our victory be as certain as the cycle of life in our sacred swamps." The Chamber of Whispers was thick with tension as Janius, still bearing the scars of recent battles, addressed the High Druids. The bioluminescent fungi pulsed erratically, mirroring the agitation in the room. "Venerated ones," Janius began, his voice heavy with the weight of recent events. "Our initial strikes have been effective, but the response has been unexpected." The eldest High Druid leaned forward, her ancient eyes narrowing. "Explain, Holy Hand. How have the Dry Ones reacted to our divine cleansing?" Janius activated a holographic display, showing the current state of the conflict. Red and green lights blinked across star systems, indicating zones of battle and control. "The humans and their allies have not retreated as we anticipated. Instead, they have declared full-scale war against the Kroll. Our attacks on their colonies and shipping lanes were seen not as a warning, but as an act of unprovoked aggression." Murmurs of disbelief and anger rippled through the chamber. One of the younger druids spoke up. "But surely they understand the sanctity of our mission? The need for our sacred swamps to spread." Janius shook his head grimly. "They do not. In fact, our actions seem to have united them. Species that were once neutral have now joined the human cause." The hologram shifted, showing footage of human leaders addressing their people, of alien races pledging allegiance to the human-led coalition. The words "unprovoked attack, aggression," and "war criminals" floated in translations beneath the speeches. "They call us monsters," Janius continued, his voice tight with suppressed rage. "They claim we seek to destroy them, to remake all worlds in our image without regard for other life." The chamber erupted in croaks and hisses of indignation. The eldest High Druid raised a gnarled hand for silence. "And what of our buffer zone, Holy Hand? Surely they must respect the ancient practices of war." Janius's large eyes closed briefly in frustration. "They do not recognize such concepts. Our attempts to create a no-man's land between our territories have been seen as further expansion. They fight not just to defend, but to push us back to our original borders." A heavy silence fell over the chamber. The implications were clear. What the Kroll had intended as a limited conflict to establish boundaries had spiraled into a full-scale interstellar war. Finally, the eldest High Druid spoke, her voice carrying the weight of prophecy. The waters of fate are murky, holy hand. But one thing is clear, we cannot falter now. The star gods have set us upon this path, and we must follow it to its end. Janius straightened, feeling the mantle of his responsibility settle heavily upon him. What would you have me do, venerated ones? Prosecute this war with all the might of the Kroll, came the response. If the Dry Ones and their allies cannot understand our divine right, then they must be made to submit by force. Let the galaxy burn if need be from the ashes. We shall spawn new swamps across the stars. Janius bowed deeply, accepting the command. As he turned to leave, to prepare his people for the long conflict ahead, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of doubt. Had they misinterpreted the will of the star gods? Had his actions brought doom upon his people? But such thoughts were heresy. He was the holy hand of war, chosen by the star gods themselves. His path was clear, no matter how difficult. As he exited the Chamber of Whispers, Janius's mind was already formulating strategies for the coming holy war. The humans and their allies had shown themselves to be formidable foes, but the Kroll had numbers, devotion, and the blessings of their gods. Let them come, he muttered to himself, his webbed hands clenching into fists. We shall drown them all in the sacred waters of our destiny. The swamps of Krolia churned with activity as the planet mobilized for total war. Janius, the holy hand of war, stood atop a living command spire, overseeing the transformation of his homeworld into a war machine. Report, he commanded, his voice carrying over the cacophony of preparation. A young officer, her scales still bright with youth, approached. Holy Hand, our first wave has secured victories in the Mist Nebula and the Algae Cluster. The humans and their allies were unprepared for our amphibious assault tactics. Janius nodded, a grim satisfaction settling over him. And our losses? Minimal, Holy Hand. Our warriors' ability to regenerate in even the slightest moisture has proven invaluable. The Dry Ones fall by the thousands while our numbers scarcely dwindle. This news sent a ripple of excitement through the gathered war council. Janius raised a webbed hand for silence. We must not grow overconfident, he cautioned. The humans are adaptable. They will learn, and they will evolve their strategies. Nevertheless, as the weeks turned to months, victory after victory was added to the Kroll tally. Their superior numbers and rapid maturation rate allowed them to replenish their forces faster than their enemies could deplete them. Janius's tactical brilliance in amphibious warfare caught the human-led alliance off guard time and again. On 100 worlds, Kroll warriors emerged from hastily terraformed swamps to overwhelm enemy positions. The sacred waters of their homeworld, carried in great arcs, were seeded on barren planets, creating instant beachheads for invasion. As news of these triumphs spread, a wave of religious fervor swept through Kroll society. The High Druids proclaimed that the star gods smiled upon their holy crusade. Young Kroll, barely out of their larval stage, clamored to join the war effort. Janius found himself elevated to near-divine status. Murals depicting his victories adorned temple walls. His name was invoked in prayers alongside those of the star gods. Yet, as he stood before a great rally of his people, watching millions of Kroll chant his name and pledge their lives to the cause, Janius felt a gnawing unease. My people, he began, his voice echoing across the vast gathering. Our victories are many, our cause is just. The star gods have blessed our efforts to cleanse the galaxy of the Dry One's taint. A deafening roar of approval met his words. Janius waited for it to subside before continuing. But let us not forget the cost of this holy war. Every Kroll life lost is a tragedy. Every world burned is a future swamp denied. We fight not for glory, but for our divine right to spread the sacred waters across the stars. As he spoke, Janius realized he was trying to convince himself as much as his people. The fervor of the crowd was intoxicating, but he could not shake the memory of burned worlds, of the screams of dying enemies and allies. Later, in the privacy of his war chamber, Janius pored over reports from the front lines. Despite their victories, the human alliance was adapting. They had begun to develop weapons specifically designed to combat Kroll physiology. Rumors spread of a human scientist working on a way to rapidly evaporate large bodies of water, a terrifying prospect for the amphibious Kroll. Holy Hand, a voice interrupted his thoughts. One of the high druids had entered silently. The sacred pools show disquiet. The future is uncertain. Janius felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean, venerated one? The high druid's eyes were troubled. The waters speak of a great fire, of stars unleashed. We cannot interpret their meaning. For a moment, Janius allowed his doubts to surface. Had they underestimated the humans? Were their early victories blinding them to a greater danger? But he quickly suppressed these thoughts. He was the holy hand of war, chosen by the star gods. Doubt was a luxury he could not afford. Then we must press our advantage while we have it, Janius declared. Prepare the fleet. We will strike at the heart of human space. Let them feel the full might of the Kroll. As the high druid left to convey his orders, Janius turned back to the star maps. The path to victory seemed clear, yet the warning of stars unleashed echoed ominously in his mind. 25 years had passed since the first shots were fired. The galaxy, once teeming with diverse life and civilizations, now bore the scars of a relentless, grinding war. Janius, his once vibrant scales now dulled with age and stress, stood before a holographic display of the known galaxy, his eyes narrowed in concentration. Holy Hand, a battle-worn officer, approached. The humans have pushed us back from the Orion Arm. Our colonies in the sector are lost. Janius absorbed the news with a stoic nod. Gone were the days of easy victories and rapid advances. The war had evolved into a brutal war of attrition, with both sides paying a terrible price for every system gained or lost. What of the Algae Nebula, he inquired, his voice gravelly from years of issuing commands. We hold, but barely. The Human Alliance has developed new terraforming reversal technology. They're turning our swamp worlds back into barren rocks, Holy Hand. Janius felt a flare of anger, the audacity of the Dry Ones to undo the sacred work of the Kroll. But anger alone would not win this war. Redirect the 7th spawning fleet to reinforce the nebula, he ordered. We cannot lose our foothold there. As the officer hurried to carry out his commands, Janius reflected on the long years of conflict. The Kroll's initial advantages, their numbers, their rapid maturation, their ability to terraform worlds quickly had been steadily eroded by human ingenuity and the unity of their alliance. He thought back to some of the war's defining moments. The Battle of Mist's End, where a Kroll armada had been lured into a trap, caught between a pulsar and a fleet of human ships with newly developed desiccation beams. The Siege of Earth, a bold attempt to strike at the heart of human space that had ultimately failed, costing the Kroll millions of lives and turning neutral species decisively against them. The miracle at Swamp's Hope, where a lone Kroll cruiser had somehow held off an entire human battle group, inspiring a religious revival among the increasingly demoralized Kroll population. Each victory had been hard won, each defeat bitter, and still the war raged on. A commotion at the entrance to the war room drew Janius from his reverie. A group of high druids entered, their faces grave. Holy Hand, the eldest among them, spoke, her voice quavering. We bring dire news. The sacred pools. They have gone still. Janius felt his heart skip a beat. The pools had guided the Kroll for millennia. For them to fall silent now, in their hour of need. What does it mean, he asked, dreading the answer. We do not know, the high druid admitted. Perhaps the star gods have abandoned us. Perhaps this war was not their will after all. The implications of her words hung heavy in the air. If the war was not sanctioned by the star gods, then the billions of lives lost, the countless worlds destroyed, all of it had been for nothing. Janius felt the weight of 25 years of command, of holy purpose, threatening to crush him. But he could not falter, not now. The will of the star gods is mysterious, he proclaimed, as much to himself as to those gathered. We must have faith. Our cause is just. We fight not just for ourselves, but for the future of all worlds, for the sacred waters that bring life. His words seemed to reassure the high druids, but Janius saw doubt in the eyes of his officers, the same doubt that had been growing in his own heart for years. As the War Council dispersed, Janius remained alone in the war room, staring at the holographic display. Swathes of red indicated human-controlled space, while the green of Kroll territory seemed to shrink before his eyes. "Star gods," he whispered, "a prayer and a plea, guide us. Show us the path to victory, or to peace." But the stars remained silent, and Janius, the holy hand of war, felt more alone than ever. Little did he know that the humans were preparing a final, desperate gambit, one that would shatter the stalemate and bring the long crusade to a cataclysmic end. The command center of the swamp's embrace was a hive of frantic activity. Janius, his aged form still commanding respect, stood at its center, his eyes fixed on the strategic display. Red indicators blinked ominously, showing a massive human fleet converging on the Kroll homeworld star system. "Holy Hand," a young officer approached, her voice trembling. "The humans. They've broken through our outer defenses. The mist wall has fallen." Janius closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the blow. The mist wall, a vast network of automated defenses and manned stations, had been their last, best hope of keeping the war away from Krollia. Its fall meant that for the first time in 25 years, their homeworld was truly threatened. How he croaked, his voice hoarse from issuing endless commands. "A new weapon, Holy Hand. Our scouts report. It's like nothing we've ever seen. It tears holes in space itself, bypassing our strongest shields." Janius felt a chill run down his spine. Was this the fire of the stars that the High Druids had foreseen so long ago? "Prepare for a full planetary evacuation," he ordered, his mind racing. "Send word to all our remaining colonies. We must preserve our species, no matter the cost." As his officers scrambled to carry out his commands, a communication request flashed on the main screen. It was from the flagship of the human fleet. With a heavy heart, Janius accepted the call. The face that appeared was scarred and weathered, a human male with steel-gray hair and eyes that spoke of countless battles. "This is Fleet Admiral Savage of the United Earth Federation," the human growled, his voice rough as gravel. "I'm here to deliver an ultimatum." Janius straightened, summoning all the dignity of his office. "Speak, human. The holy hand of the Kroll listens." "Listen good, 'cause I'm only saying this once," Savage said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "This war ends now. Billions dead. Whole species wiped out. Surrender unconditionally or face annihilation." Janius felt a surge of defiance. "You dare threaten the chosen of the star gods? We will never surrender. Our cause is just our—" "Save it," Savage interrupted, his scarred face twisting into a scowl. "Your just cause has brought nothing but death. We've cracked your sacred pools, Janius. They're not divine. Just some quirk of nature that messed with your evolution. No star gods. No divine mission. Just a bunch of amphibians who bit off more than they could chew." The words hit Janius like a physical blow. Could it be true? Had everything they believed, everything they had fought for, been a lie? "One planetary rotation," Savage continued, his voice hard. "That's what you've got to surrender. After that, we unleash hell. This is your only warning." The transmission cut off, leaving Janius in stunned silence. Around him, his officers looked to him for guidance, for reassurance. But for the first time in his long life, Janius, the holy hand of war, had none to give. "Clear the room," he ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. As his staff filed out, Janius activated a secure channel to the Chamber of Whispers. The faces of the High Druids appeared, their expressions grim. "You heard?" Janius asked. The eldest among them nodded. "The sacred pools remain silent, Holy Hand. We cannot guide you in this." Janius felt the weight of his entire species resting on his shoulders. The humans' ultimatum, the silence of the pools, the devastation of a quarter-century of war, it all pressed down on him, threatening to crush his spirit. "What if?" he began, then faltered. To even think it felt like blasphemy. What if we were wrong? What if this war, all of it, was a mistake? The High Druids exchanged glances, their age-old certainty visibly crumbling. "The will of the star gods is mysterious," one of them offered weakly. but the words rang hollow. Janius made his decision. Prepare a response to the humans. We will. But before he could finish, alarms blared throughout the ship. On the strategic display, a new threat appeared: human ships, materializing impossibly close to Kroalia. Holy Hand, an officer, burst in. They're launching some kind of projectiles towards the planet. Janius watched in horror as multiple objects streaked towards his homeworld. Whatever decision he was about to make, it seemed the humans had made it for him. The long crusade was about to reach its cataclysmic end, and Janius could only watch as the fate of his entire species hung in the balance. Janius stared in horror as the projectiles streaked towards Kroalia. His webbed hands gripped the command console, knuckles white with tension. Around him, the war room erupted into chaos, officers shouting contradictory orders and pleas for guidance. Intercept those projectiles, Janius roared, snapping out of his momentary paralysis. Launch everything we have. But it was too late. The objects pierced through Kroalia's atmosphere with terrifying ease, their purpose still unknown but undoubtedly devastating. Suddenly, the main view screen flickered to life. Fleet Admiral Savage's scarred visage filled the display, his eyes hard and unforgiving. "This is your final warning," Janius Savage growled. "What you just saw was a demonstration. Those weren't nukes, not yet. But the next wave will be if you don't stand down immediately." Janius felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. You would destroy an entire world? Billions of innocent Kroll. Savage's expression didn't change. "You started this war, Frog. We're finishing it. Your choice: surrender or annihilation." The transmission cut off abruptly. Janius turned to his officers, seeing the fear and uncertainty in their eyes. For a species that had always believed in their divine right to expand, in their invincibility under the protection of the star gods, this moment was shattering. Holy Hand, one of the younger officers, spoke up, her voice quavering. What do we do?" Janius closed his eyes, the weight of 25 years of war pressing down on him. He thought of the billions of lives lost, the countless worlds destroyed, all because of a belief that now seemed to be crumbling before his eyes. He began, but was interrupted by a blinding flash on the view screen. One of the human projectiles had detonated high in Kroalia's atmosphere, but instead of the expected destruction, it released a massive electromagnetic pulse. Across the planet, Kroll technology flickered and died. "They've disabled our planetary defenses," an officer reported, panic evident in his voice. We're defenseless." Janius felt something break inside him. The unthinkable had happened. Kroalia, the sacred homeworld, lay exposed before their enemies. All their belief, all their technology, all their military might have failed them. In that moment, Janius, the holy hand of war, made the hardest decision of his life. "Open a channel to Fleet Admiral Savage," he ordered, his voice hollow. The human's face appeared once more, eyebrow raised in question. Janius swallowed hard, forcing the words out. "We surrender, unconditionally." A long moment of silence followed. Then Savage nodded curtly. "Smart choice. Stand by for further instructions. Any sign of resistance, and we finish what we started. Savage out." As the transmission ended, Janius turned to face his stunned officers and the holographic projections of the High Druids. The silence in the war room was deafening. "May the star gods forgive us," one of the High Druids whispered. But Janius shook his head slowly. "No," he said, his voice gaining strength. "We must forgive ourselves. We were wrong. Our hubris, our belief in our own divine right. It led us to this. The humans didn't defeat us. We defeated ourselves." As the reality of their situation sank in, Janius gazed out at the stars, the same stars he had once believed had granted the Kroll divine purpose. Now they seemed cold and indifferent, silent witnesses to the end of an era. The war was over. The long crusade had failed, and in its wake, Janius knew, would come a reckoning that would shake Kroll civilization to its very foundations. As human ships began to enter Kroalia's orbit, Janius steeled himself for what was to come. The age of the Kroll's blind expansion was over. Now would come the hard task of rebuilding, of finding a new purpose in a galaxy they had nearly destroyed in their misguided zeal. The power of the stars, Janius realized, was not theirs to command. It belonged to those who understood it, respected it, and used it wisely. The humans had proven themselves worthy of that power. The Kroll, in their hubris, had not. As the first human shuttles began their descent to Kroalia's surface, Janius whispered a quiet prayer, not to the star gods, but to whatever force truly governed the universe. Grant us wisdom. Grant us humility, and grant us a second chance. The sacred swamps of Kroalia churned with an unnatural fury. Janius stood on the balcony of the grand spire, his aged form battered by winds that carried the acrid scent of burning vegetation and ionized air. In the distance, mushroom clouds bloomed like malevolent flowers, their stems reaching into the stratosphere. Fleet Admiral Savage's ultimatum had been clear, but the Kroll High Command, in their final act of defiance, had chosen annihilation over surrender. Now, Janius watched helplessly as his homeworld burned. A junior officer, scales dulled with ash, approached him tentatively. "Holy Hand," she croaked, her voice barely audible over the howling winds, "the humans. They're broadcasting on all frequencies." Janius nodded grimly, turning to face the holographic display. Fleet Admiral Savage's scarred visage flickered into view, his eyes hard as flint. "This is the price of your arrogance," Savage growled. "You were given a chance. You chose poorly." Janius felt the weight of millennia of Kroll history pressing down upon him. "You've won, human," he said, his voice hollow. "Was this destruction necessary?" Savage's expression didn't change. "You started this war. We're ending it. Permanently." As if to punctuate his words, another salvo of nuclear missiles streaked across the sky, their targets the last remaining Kroll strongholds. Janius watched, numb, as centuries of Kroll civilization were reduced to radioactive ash. "The sacred pools," Janius whispered, a last desperate hope flickering in his heart. "Surely now, in our darkest hour, the star gods will speak." But as he turned to the chamber of whispers, he found only destruction. The pools, once a serene source of divine guidance, now boiled and churned with radioactive fury. The high druids lay scattered, their bodies broken, their faith shattered. In that moment, Janius understood the true meaning of the prophecy. The fire of the stars wasn't a divine blessing, it was the awesome, terrible power that humans had harnessed. The very power that the Kroll, in their hubris, had thought was their birthright to spread across the galaxy. "Holy Hand," the young officer spoke again, her voice quavering. What do we do now?" Janius looked out over the burning remnants of his world, then back to the holographic image of Savage. In the human's eyes, he saw not just victory, but a grim understanding of the burden that came with such power. "We surrender," Janius said, his voice gaining strength even as his hearts broke. "Not just our military, but our beliefs, our way of life. We were wrong, Admiral Savage, catastrophically wrong." Savage's expression softened slightly. "It's Fleet Admiral, and it's about damn time you realize that." As the transmission cut off, Janius turned to face the handful of Kroll that remained in the grand spire. Their eyes, once filled with religious fervor, now held only confusion and fear. "My people," Janius began, his voice carrying the weight of 25 years of war and millennia of misguided belief, "we stand at the end of an era. Our gods are silent, our sacred pools are destroyed, but we are not finished." He paused, looking each survivor in the eye. "We have been humbled, but we have been given a chance to learn. The humans and their allies didn't just defeat us, they showed us the true power of the stars. Not as a divine right, but as a responsibility. A power earned through understanding and respect, not blind faith." As he spoke, Janius felt a change come over him. The mantle of Holy Hand of War fell away, replaced by something new, a determination to lead his people not to conquest, but to redemption. "We will rebuild," he declared, "not as conquerors, but as students. We will learn from those we once sought to destroy, and perhaps one day we will stand among the stars not as their self-proclaimed masters, but as their humble custodians." As the first human ships began to land, bringing not just occupying forces but also aid and the promise of a new beginning, Janius looked to the sky. The stars that had once seemed to promise divine favor now twinkled with a different message, one of infinite possibility, of mysteries yet to be unraveled, and of a future where the power of the stars could be harnessed not for destruction, but for the betterment of all. The war was over. The Kroll Empire had fallen, but from its ashes, Janius vowed, would rise a new civilization, one that understood the true meaning of wielding the power of the stars. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you loved it. Please remember to subscribe if you did like it so you can see more videos like this. And please give us a like and a comment too. I'll see you in the next one.